Your kitchen is not slowing you down because you need a bigger space or fancier tools. It is slowing you down because of an invisible shape, or rather, the absence of one. A shape that exists in nearly every professional kitchen in Japan and almost no home kitchen in the West. I drew that shape into my own kitchen 8 weeks ago, without moving a single wall or spending more than $40, and it gave me back 2 full hours every single week. Stay with me until the end, because the shape itself is simple, 3 points, a triangle, but the way Japan builds that triangle is completely different from the version most people have vaguely heard of, and that difference is the entire reason it works. Let's start with why a triangle, of all shapes, matters at all. In professional kitchen design, there is a long-established idea called the work triangle, the relationship between your stove, your sink, and your refrigerator, the 3 points you move between most while cooking. Most Western home kitchens have a work triangle by accident, whatever shape the room happened to produce when the appliances were installed. Japanese kitchen design treats the triangle as something you build on purpose, governed by a principle called dosa, the efficiency and economy of physical movement. Every motion your body makes while cooking is treated as a cost, and a well-designed kitchen minimizes that cost the way a well-designed factory minimizes wasted steps on a production line. The Japanese approach is not just about where the stove, sink, and fridge happen to sit. It is about 3 specific distance rules and 1 ingredient zone that almost no Western kitchen has, and together those 4 elements are what actually saved me the 2 hours. The first rule is the distance between the sink and the stove. In Japanese kitchen design, this distance, the path you walk most often while cooking, since washing and heating happen dozens of times in a single meal, should be no more than 4 to 6 steps. In my kitchen, before I changed anything, that distance was 11 steps, because my prep counter, cutting board, and trash bin were positioned in a way that forced a detour around an island every single time I moved between the two. 11 steps does not sound like much until you multiply it by the number of times you wash, drain, rinse, or fill a pot during one meal, which researchers studying kitchen ergonomics have measured at an average of 18 to 24 trips per meal for a typical home cook. 11 steps, 20 times, is well over 200 unnecessary steps in a single dinner. I moved my cutting board and a small rolling cart to sit directly between the sink and the stove, cutting the distance to 5 steps. That single change accounted for more of my time savings than anything else on this list. The second rule is keeping the refrigerator outside the primary cooking path, not because it should be far away, but because it should never be something you walk through to reach the stove or sink. In my old layout, the refrigerator door, when open, blocked the exact route between my prep counter and the stove, which meant that every time someone opened it mid-cook, the entire kitchen briefly stopped functioning. Japanese kitchen design calls this kind of obstruction a Dowson conflict, a collision in the flow line, the same concept that applies to furniture blocking a doorway, except here it is happening dozens of times during food preparation specifically. I could not move my refrigerator, most people can't, but I could change which side its door opened toward relative to my counter, and I shifted my prep zone 18 inches to the left so the open door no longer crossed my path. The fridge stayed exactly where it was. The conflict disappeared anyway. The third rule, and the one almost no one outside Japan has heard of, is the principle of the 4th point. The traditional Western triangle has 3 points: stove, sink, fridge. Japanese kitchen design frequently adds a 4th, a dedicated prep zone, sometimes called the Sagyou Supesu, the workspace, positioned so that it sits adjacent to both the sink and the stove rather than off to the side. Most Western kitchens treat prep as something that happens wherever there is open counter, which means it migrates around the kitchen depending on what else is going on that day. A fixed 4th point means your hands always know exactly where chopping happens, which sounds trivial until you realize how much time is lost in a typical cook deciding, mid-task, where to set something down. I cleared 18 inches of counter between my sink and stove permanently, no mail, no fruit bowl, nothing allowed to migrate onto it, and that became my only prep zone. The decision of where to chop no longer exists. It was made once, in advance, and now it simply runs. The 4th and final element is what Japanese home cooks call the Toridashi jun, the retrieval order, the sequence in which ingredients and tools are arranged based on the actual order you use them in a typical meal, not based on category. Western kitchen organization tends to group by type, all the spices together, all the oils together, all the pots together, which looks tidy but ignores the actual sequence of cooking. Japanese kitchen organization instead asks what comes first, second, and third in the motion of preparing a meal, and arranges accordingly, so that salt sits near the stove rather than in a spice rack across the room, and the cutting board lives directly above the knife drawer rather than in a separate cabinet. I spent one Sunday afternoon rearranging my kitchen this way, tracking the actual sequence of 3 different meals I cook most often, and moving every tool to sit along that sequence rather than by category. It took 90 minutes total. The retrieval time for nearly everything I use regularly dropped to under 2 seconds, compared to what I later clocked, almost embarrassed, at 12 to 15 seconds before, multiplied across dozens of retrievals a day. Here's what 8 weeks of this triangle actually produced. I tracked my cooking time for 2 weeks before making any changes, then again for 2 weeks after, using nothing more than the timer on my phone. Before, an average weeknight dinner, prep through cleanup, took 51 minutes. After, the same category of meal took 34 minutes, a 17-minute reduction, multiplied across roughly 7 cooking sessions a week, comes out to almost exactly 2 hours saved, every single week, without changing a single recipe or buying a single new appliance. The time did not disappear from the food. It disappeared from the walking, the deciding, and the searching, the parts of cooking that were never really about cooking at all. There is a deeper reason this works, beyond the mechanics of distance and sequence. Japanese kitchens are often small, smaller on average than most Western kitchens by a significant margin, and small spaces force a discipline that larger spaces let you avoid. When you have room to spread out, inefficiency hides inside the extra space. A kitchen with too much room for things to migrate becomes a kitchen where your hands never quite know where anything is, because nothing was ever forced to earn a fixed place. The triangle is not really about saving steps for their own sake. It is about removing the dozens of tiny decisions: where do I set this down, where did I put the salt, which counter is free right now, that accumulate into the real exhaustion of cooking, the kind that has very little to do with the actual chopping and stirring and everything to do with the navigation around it. I want to be clear that none of this required a renovation. The total cost of changing my kitchen's triangle was a $40 rolling cart and one Sunday afternoon of moving things 18 inches to the left and rearranging 2 drawers. The shape was already there, hiding in my kitchen's bad geometry. I just had to draw it correctly. There is also a quieter benefit I did not expect when I started this. Cooking used to be something I rushed through to get to the part where I could sit down. Now, with the walking and searching removed, what is left is mostly just the actual cooking, the chopping, the smell of something starting to brown in the pan, the small satisfaction of a clean line of motion from cutting board to pot. Japanese home cooking culture has a phrase for this state, "Teiga-aboru," the hands remember, describing the point where a task becomes so smooth it requires almost no conscious thought at all, leaving the mind free to simply be present in the kitchen rather than managing it. I did not expect a rearranged counter to change how cooking felt emotionally, but it did, because so much of what made cooking feel like a chore was never the cooking itself. I also want to mention what did not work, because it matters as much as what did. I initially tried to buy my way into a more efficient kitchen, a new knife block, a magnetic spice rack, a hanging pot rail, assuming new tools would fix old geometry. None of it moved the needle until I addressed the actual distances and the actual sequence. The lesson, if there is one, is that efficiency in a Japanese kitchen is almost never about acquiring something new. It is about correctly mapping what you already have onto the path your body actually takes. The triangle was never missing from my kitchen because I lacked the right tools. It was missing because nobody, including the person who designed my apartment, had ever thought about it as a triangle at all. So here is everything in one breath. 4 to 6 steps between your sink and your stove, no detours allowed. A refrigerator door that never crosses your primary cooking path. A fixed 4th point, a single dedicated prep zone that never migrates and never has to be decided on twice. And ingredients and tools arranged not by category but by the actual sequence you use them in, the retrieval order, so your hands always know exactly where to reach before your mind has to ask. Now I want to hear from you. Walk into your kitchen tonight and count your own steps between the sink and the stove. Just count them, nothing else. Tell me the number in the comments. If it's under 6, you are already living inside the triangle without knowing it. If it's 11, like mine was, you already know exactly where your 2 hours went. And if this kitchen made you think of someone who complains every single week about how exhausting cooking dinner has become, send this to them. They are probably not exhausted by the cooking. They are exhausted by the walking, the same way I was, and they might be one Sunday afternoon away from getting 2 hours of their week back. This is Tokyo Horizon. I will see you in the next one.